Hello everybody, welcome to the Eternal Spoiler Breakdown. My name is Pojo, and we were actually streaming tonight. I didn't realize that there had actually been a bunch of announcements for Defiance, so we're going to go over all of those. I've just gotten a good look at them, and there's a lot to talk about. It's definitely going to be an interesting set. We have some really cool art for the new power cards, the tokens, and we're going to be talking about those first because they give us a really interesting introduction to the set and what's going on in the set. So this is Token of Honor. It's a Skycrag clansman with their hands over their eyes, wearing 3 matched set of rings, a fire, a justice, and a primal colored ring, which is because this is a fire, justice, or primal token, which means that this is the set with what you would call wedges or triangles or whatever you want to call it. There are sets of 3 different colors where basically we have some interaction between 3 different elements, and we're actually going to be getting cards in 3 colors. So this is the fire, justice, or primal, which is, yeah, I guess it's definitely a Skycrag Clans card because you have Eileen moving in from essentially the justice primal setup into Argenport, and there's that whole Skycrag interaction. She went from Skycrag to Argenport, so now you have a bunch of clansmen in Argenport, which is, basically you have this sort of clansman being introduced to the pillar of civilization, and this token of honor kind of represents them in a pretty interesting way. I think it's a pretty good idea of where the clans are at the moment, with them being in charge of Argenport, now having to fulfill the duties of the paladins and the Valkyries, since they probably wiped out a large portion of them. And sort of being the military force in Argenport means there's a bit of a change of scenery there, and we have a bit more of a melding of different types of influence, which is very cool stuff. So yeah, it is a cool wedge color, the honor color, as I guess we're going to be calling it for now, since we don't seem to have any particular names for these wedges yet, but hopefully we'll have some colors for them pretty soon, so that should be pretty exciting. Yeah. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at all 5 of these. The art for them is really interesting. It's really well done. I really like all of the tokens arts, and I like most of them. And then overall, it's looking like we're going to get maybe 5 to 6 wedges this set around. It's not going to be Magic the Gathering, where you have the opposing and allied color wedges, because basically there aren't really opposing or allied colors in Eternal. The factions just kind of intermingle, so we can have different colors getting released every time, and right now we've got 5 to break down for you. All right, so that's Honor. Here's Vision, Time, Justice, or Shadow. We have a hand shaking in potentially some sort of back alley, a scarred hand wearing those particular rings, of course. We have, again, sort of a Justice focus in this one, but it's definitely, Shadow and Time. So we're looking at power and influence and sort of accumulating, building the future. I think this is a pretty quintessential Argenport card as well. Definitely does get that Justice Shadow right very correctly, and adding in the sort of time element of seeking knowledge and sort of looking towards the future, New Tomorrow style. This is the quintessential Argenport card, and I really like it. It's a hand shaking in the background. It's a neat idea, and I like Vision as a faction. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of cards in this faction and seeing what all we get to build with them. Could be really cool. We will be seeing, I believe, at least 1 Vision card in this spoiler. Token of Instinct. We've got Fire, Time, and Primal. This is the Elysian Explorer, or the sort of sand I'm not sure what word I'm looking for. Sand weathered explorer, looking up at a tome with bandaged hands and sort of exploring knowledge and instinct and all of that. Champion of Impulse is a Fire, Time, and if you add in the knowledge, you have a Token of Instinct. I like that quite a bit. So Impulse to Instinct, it's an interesting combination, adding some elements of Primal, and I think this really sort of justifies the sort of Elysian factions in an interesting way. So it's a cool place to go with Time, and I'm pretty interested to see. This is probably going to be my favorite faction, but I don't know for sure. We will certainly basically be basing that off of the cards when they come out. I really like this one. It's cool art. Okay, Token of Knowledge. This is Time, Primal, and Shadow. We've got an elf of some kind looking at, like, putting their hand on a tree. This one's a little odd because the center color is actually off. It's Time, Primal, Shadow, but the rings are in the wrong order. It's Primal, Shadow, Time. Yeah, so, like, you know, if you're looking at, like, elves, I think they have sort of a primal base just because they are very much about, like, from what we've seen, they have some interaction with, like, the beasts of the land. A lot of them tend to be very evil at the moment and sort of, like, coming out of the Direwood because we have the Feln as, like, the outcast elves. But, like, seeing some, like, sort of Elysian-colored elves and elves in, like, sort of both factions could be interesting, and maybe we'll actually get some explanation as to what elves are and what they mean to the plot. I'm not particularly interested in this faction at the moment, but hopefully there'll be some cool things revealed about them or something interesting going on with them. And yeah, these are interesting colors to be playing around in, so and gonna be one of the defining factions. I think it's gonna be 5 wedges right now, but who knows, they could release all 10. We certainly don't know for sure. Token of Ambition, Fire, Justice, or Shadow, and we have, of course, a hand on a gun. This is definitely like sort of the Cabal faction, gunslingers and Rakano outlaws. Like, basically gunslingers have always been in exactly these colors, so it makes sense to have a gunslinger as the front for the Token of Ambition. And yeah, once again, the Justice is centered here, which is kind of interesting. Like, it does make sense if you're considering that most gunslingers are either Argenport or Rakano, and you're sort of blending these two factions together at the center, you get Justice. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. And so yeah, we have a gunslinger faction. Hopefully we'll see some really cool, like, just rad tricolor gunslingers. I'm very excited about this. Should be good stuff. All right, so those are the 5 wedges that we have at the moment. We have Knowledge, Instinct, Vision, Honor, and Ambition. And we have 2 cards, one of them from, I believe, the Ambition, so I guess we'll move to that next, and one from the Vision faction. So on the Ambition faction, we have Blaze. This is deal damage to an enemy equal to your number of units. You gain that much armor. There's a card that we got revealed, a legendary, in fact, that might make this card a little bit better, but basically Blaze is going to be more important if you are actually generating a decent amount of tokens and other interesting things. As a spell, this looks like a pretty interesting draft common, and I think that most of the early spoilers tend to be like very good draft cards that aren't like super oriented towards like being ridiculous ranked setups. There is actually one blue card that might end up being a interesting ranked card in the future, but I would say that this card, like, as it stands, is a little bit too much of a requirement to be super good in ranked, because it requires you to have a decent amount of units to get the best amount of benefit possible from it. At 5 cost, you probably want to have 4 to 5 units on the board in order to actually not only kill an enemy unit, and it can target enemy units, which is important, but also to like gain a relevant amount of life or strength to justify the cost of the card. Make no mistake, cards that do anything while also gaining armor or health are often really useful. There are a lot of decks that basically sort of really only have reach to 25 or to a little bit more than 25, and if you are keeping them under control, then like they just won't quite get there when you're using cards like Blaze. But I do think that this card is overcosted for a ranked setup because you just have to do so much to make it work. Nonetheless, there is definitely a deck that it'll fit into, because like if you are just playing a massive amount of tokens, then being able to deal 12 damage and gain that much health is like ridiculous nonsense. So anytime that you can fill the board with like tons of little 1/1s or tons of things that are like just kind of chaffy cards that can't attack, or basically your opponent doesn't want to deal with them and so they just leave them on the board, Blaze is definitely something that can actually really take advantage of that. And we have a legendary card that we will be revealing at the end that kind of fits with this sort of Blaze strategy. So there's the possibility that Blaze could be a good card in ranked, but I do think that it just looks too expensive. It's a really interesting flash fire style effect that actually could be dealing a lot of damage in 3 colors, and never really discount direct damage spells even when they're kind of inefficient. Like, this is still a card that could be kind of hot nonsense depending on what kind of setup you have. Like, Mortar certainly is powerful in certain situations. For the same reason, Blaze could be pretty good, but 5 is a lot for that kind of direct damage, and for a control element, I'm a little skeptical. Nonetheless, this card is going to be like pretty bonkers in draft. It's going to be something that you're going to want to pick up pretty heavily because it kills a flyer, gives you armor for weapons, and basically stabilizes your health total, wins races, and just really does a lot of things that you want to do. It's common removal in 3 colors, so seems like it's going to be a reasonable pickup. Okay, the other card in 3 colors that we have been revealed is from, let me double check, Vision. And yeah, it is a Bleak Basin guide. This is a 1/1 flying with Empower +3/+3 this turn. So yeah, a 4/4 flyer every turn if you are playing power consistently, which once again, this is another card that's going to be very, very strong in draft, probably not so strong in a ranked environment. Although certainly if you can get it down and then immediately start empowering with multiple setups, you can get some pretty good stuff. I like seeing owls with the correct scaling going on. Like, we've only seen these owls so far in like 8 of the Huru, and like in Great Parliament they aren't really scaled to people so much, so we don't usually see that these owls are in fact 12 to 20 feet tall, so that's always nice to notice. But yeah, like this card looks like a pretty disgusting draft common, and also something that, like, you know, sort of heavily encourages you to go into a particular wedge in draft. So this might be like, I think that's a good idea. I think it's good design to have these common cards be like a very good reason to sort of pick up 3 colors. So when we start seeing our draft packs along with like these wedge colors, this will be something to sort of help define those particular colors. Something that I didn't like coming at the end of Fall of Argenport is when they changed around the draft setup to sort of discourage dual faction pairings. They basically took a bunch of commons that were 2-drops and they made them all double influence, and that made like actually like going into other colors a lot harder. So like it made basically signaling in draft feel really weird and wibbly, and it was a lot harder to pick cards and get like sort of the right things going in draft. And that's something that's sort of been happening at the end of Fall of Argenport that I haven't been super fond of. Bleak Basin Guide and Blaze are both really good examples of how to like generate interesting signals in draft and make cards that are fun to follow and fun to play with. So I'm pretty excited about this card just for the draft environment, and yeah, it's pretty cool to sort of see this card being introduced. Yeah, so like the draft environment is looking okay for 3 colors, and that's going to be really fun because draft in Eternal is always delightful. Like, it's a really enjoyable format. I love seeing like interesting draft setups, and I'm pretty excited to see this card maybe in a ranked deck, like with New Tomorrow or some other dumb nonsense where we have like a ton of empowers. That could be cool, but usually a 1/1 for 3 isn't gonna make it. Like, Loyal Watchwing isn't playable. Most other 3-cost 1/1s aren't particularly playable, but like it's possible that you could maybe do something interesting with it. All right, so we do have a ranked playable card here called Elvish Swindler. This is summon, play a relic of your choice with cost 2 or less from your deck. We don't know what all this card's going to be able to play yet, but like at the very least, it can get some cards that are out of its colors and some cards that are like quite ridiculous, like including the fairly obvious Cauldron Cookbook. Elvish Swindler is a card that simply picks that card out, immediately plays it, and just doesn't require a whole lot, while also putting a blocker on the board, something that you can use to sacrifice or maybe like block some small units while doing like other types of stabilization. This card gets you like relics of interesting value, including relic weapons like Miner's Musket or Talon of Nostrix. Yeah, like at the moment, I think it's very, very safe. Knowing what we currently know about like the current 2-cost relic environment, there's not a lot that's ridiculously out of control here. Like, if this card played a relic of cost 3 or less from your deck at 6 or something like that, it would be pretty crazy, because then you'd be getting Crown of Possibilities, you'd be getting like a lot of really like more ridiculous stuff. And if you were getting like relics of 4-cost or more, you'd be getting into like really, really powerful like game defining relics, like, you know, obviously Chalice and Xenon Obelisk and other stuff like that. So yeah, like Elvish Swindler is something that we definitely are going to want to like sort of be I'm glad that it's at the power level that it is, where it's kind of looking for relics of cheaper costs, and I'm also glad that it's fairly aggressively high costed, and also like in a spot where it actually does like not have a great stat line for its cost. Like both of those things are pretty important for tutor effects of this type, because these are really, really powerful effects. Being able to grab these types of things and actually play like whatever particular relic you want is a big deal. As someone's pointing out, like you can grab cards like Infinite Hourglass, Sandstorm Scarf, you can grab your Azurite Prixis. But you can grab a lot of interesting like rule changing cards like Paladin Oathbook, Combustion Cell for card draw. There are a lot of interesting choices with Elvish Swindler, and there's going to be more choices added, of course, in Defiance. So this card could potentially be very exciting. I can see it being a ranked staple despite its fairly low stats and its fairly high cost. Both of those things are probably like very deliberate choices, and I do think that this card would be insanely powerful if it were any cheaper or like any stronger than it currently is. So we'll see how well balanced it is and whether or not it's powerful enough to be played consistently in ranked. I certainly hope that it does see a lot of play in ranked, but I also don't want it to see like a ridiculous amount of play in ranked, because I really always worry about these cards. They can definitely break games wide open, and so you have to be really, really careful with these in terms of design. It looks at the moment like the Dire Wolf team, as always, knows exactly what they're doing when they're costing their cards. So like that always gives me a lot of faith in the system, and I'm pretty excited to play with Swindler. There's going to be some really fun things to do with it, so should be good stuff. Also an elf rogue. If we ever get any like rogue archetypes, that could be fun, but elf in particular does have some things that you can currently do with Lethrai. There's some Lethrai card that actually draws spells that could be fun. Okay, so earlier on we revealed this card Blaze that deals damage equal to your number of units and you gain that much armor. We were talking about how there might be some cards that make this card better, and here's an interesting example of that. This is the legendary that was revealed, Savior of the Meek. Okay, pop it on out, and we got the Watchman along with it. All of these were revealed on the live stream, so I don't have the high quality images, unfortunately. Savior of the Meek, flying Lifesteal Fate, play a 1/1 Watchman with Lifesteal that can't attack. And of course, the 1/1 Watchman himself can't attack, does all of his regular things. I really like the art on Savior of the Meek. It's a lovely looking Valkyrie, really does some cool things. At 9 cost, as a 7/7 flying lifesteal, it's essentially a Roland's Honor Guard for 2 more, which means that it is not going to be ranked playable unless those Watchmen are good. So you're not playing this card for the 7/7, you're playing it for the Watchmen. And that's an interesting question. Are the Watchmen good? Well, they are tokens, they stall at aggro, they are free, and they play off of fate, which means that if you're using cards like Second Sight or any other cards to put cards on top and consistently draw them, if you're giving Savior Echo, if you're doing anything along those lines that just like completely like make Watchmen happen more often, then you have a pretty good board of interesting defenders that are hard to kill and very, very obnoxious and kind of stand in the way and gain a lot of life and do all of those kinds of things. That also means that you're playing a bunch of like little lifesteal Watchmen that can stabilize your board while also maybe playing some aggressive units like Crown Watch Paladin, and then finishing your opponent off with a Blaze at like 5 for, you know, like say 8 or 9. So you could do a deck that's just like Rakano Outlaw, Crown Watch Paladin, the 2/2 Deadly Warcry, and like a bunch of other Warcry units, be really, really super aggressive, play your Blazes to finish off the board, and like make your Auric Runehammers or your Sword of Icarias much, much better. And then like if all else fails, you still have a 7/7 at the very, very top end when you are like in the slow board where like you can actually do some cool things. Like this card does have potential. Certainly the Watchmen are not super strong by themselves. You have to have a lot of good synergy with them. They're soldiers, which means that they don't have gunslinger synergy, which is always a little bit awkward. There's no soldier synergy right now that does anything interesting, but maybe there will be in the factions that we are seeing or the wedge colors that we are seeing. Like I could definitely see them in something that has like Vision or some other faction. Maybe that'll be something that we could actually do some cool things with. So Savior of the Meek is an interesting build around me card. It does create some interesting counter aggro strategies, but for the most part, right now it doesn't seem to have a lot of power. We will see if this card is super playable. I'm very interested to see like what all we can do with it. Yeah, like But at the moment, the question is, are the Watchmen good enough? And I'm not sure yet. They are okay counter aggro cards. They stop the standard like Oni Ronin or other types of cards like, you know, Groundwatch Paladin, that kind of thing. They are basically like really, really big irritants. And then at the end of the game, you do have the Savior of the Meek to play out. But like, yeah, it's a question of whether or not you're going to be doing something interesting with the Watchmen later on. Are you going to be unstabling them or doing something cool with them? So, bare minimum token right now. Not being able to attack makes them somewhat not useful, but if there's interesting ways to silence them while also getting other benefits, if there's better soldier synergies, if there are really, really good buffs, or if you've got a decently aggressive deck with Blaze that actually does do cool things in the wedge, then I can see Savior of the Meek being useful in all of those situations. So yeah, the question is really going to be, what other Defiance cards support this card? Because it's fascinating, but we don't have the whole picture yet as to whether or not it's good. And if it were just printed right now in Fall of Argenport, it would not be good. There's almost nothing that you can play with it beyond like maybe some sacrifice strategies in green and red, and that probably wouldn't happen. So yeah, that's all of the spoilers for today. I'm sure we're going to be seeing some more exciting Defiance spoilers, but the main thing to take away from this is that we have 3 color wedges now. That's going to make the draft environment super exciting. Like, it's going to make ranked a whole different game as well. Like, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of these 3 color setups, and there could be some really, really fun stuff in there. I'm looking forward to seeing what all new types of decks get invented and played around with. I'm looking forward to playing lots and lots of limited format, and yeah, I'm very, very excited about like everything coming out with Defiance. So that's where I'm at right now. To the YouTube folks, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this and found it interesting. The Twitch folks, we're going to go back to a few games, so see you in just a bit. Thank you guys. Cheers.